All right, guys. Shane Schaefer here, the Director of Marketing for Florida Petroleum Marketer Association. Everybody who's here, thank you so much. And we appreciate you taking the time to do this session. This is a recorded session, so we will be sharing this out on our website and an email out to those who have registered. We know everybody is busy. We just wanted to try to get this session in before the end of the year so you can kind of know what is coming up for 2026. So we have John and Diana with us, and I'm just going to let you guys introduce yourself. Thank you so much for being here for us. And Stony, the FPMA board member here as well as a retailer to help us out on his, ideas and the way he's thinking about the product as well. So go right ahead, John and Diana.
Okay. Thanks, Shane. Appreciate you guys having us on today to talk about should we say, a somewhat surprising issue we're dealing with at this level. Kind of came out of nowhere about a month ago. But I want to start out, like I said, I'm John Tate, I'm one of the directors of government relations with the National Association of Convenience Stores up here in DC, covering the industry nationally, partnering with PFMA and other states across the country. We love our partnership with you guys, so happy to join you today. I was going to start out giving you a little bit of background on kind of how we got where we are with this hemp issue, and remember that it covers things like CBD and everything else as well. And then I'm going to hand it off to my friend Diana here, who knows infinitely more about this topic than I do, to talk about some of the really ins and outs of it and everything. So appreciate her joining us today as well. But if we start with this, we'll start actually going all the way back to 2018, the last time Congress passed an actual farm bill. Now, they're supposed to do that about every 5 years, but I know it's shocking to hear that Congress is behind on something, and we're going on about 3 years being behind on passing the latest farm bill. They keep extending it year after year for the last couple of years. But there was a provision in that law, say 7 years ago now, that was really meant to help certain tobacco farmers who were dealing with less and less product being sold have a new product or a new crop to grow and to sell, and that was hemp products. So they included a provision in the 2018 Farm Bill that said any hemp products that had a 0.3% THC content would be legal. Now, the point of this was to create a market for things like hemp rope and other textiles and things like the actual, a buzz line that was used back then. It sounds kind of silly, is rope, not dope, because this was not meant to be anything intoxicating. This didn't have to do with marijuana or cannabis. It was really just hemp, meant to be industrial hemp products. Let's give these guys a new product because tobacco is not selling as well. Well, we happen to live in a very industrious and innovative society, and a lot of people jumped on this and realized that, okay, hemp products are legal. We can have a small amount of THC content in the products that are legal. What if we take them, combine them together, squeeze them all together in all kinds of scientific terms I don't understand, and make actually intoxicating products? And it took a little while to get there, but that is where the market has ended up. And now you have a lot of different products on the market that are hemp based, but have a lot of the same impacts on folks that a lot of traditional cannabis and marijuana products have. And that, as you got the folks who originated this whole process to just provide a kind of industrial hemp textile type product provision out there, said, wait a minute, that's not what we wanted to do. And they've been looking around for a way for the last couple of years to try and tighten that up and to try and straighten that out in their minds. And even though this whole market has taken off, it really started with kind of CBD products, gummies, drinks, things like that, and developed into this intoxicating market we have now. This stuff is fairly popular in a lot of places. We've seen a lot of different state regulations, some allowing it, some banning it, some restricting it. They've been all over the place. So certain members of Congress decided it was the best to try and go back and kind of reverse what they did, or attempt to reverse what they did, and tighten down the language from 2018 to say, hey, this is what we meant. We only want these textile products out there. And the only avenue they really had to do that recently was the legislation that reopened the government, because it included a full year, it's called the continuing resolution, to allow funding to reopen most functions of the government, but also included 3 full year appropriations packages, one of those being the agriculture appropriations package, or agriculture appropriations bill, which is where they had this language inserted. Really had nothing to do with reopening the government. It was just this was their vehicle to do this under the Ag Approach package. I'm going to ask Diane a little more detail on what's happened here a little bit, but there was a vote that some folks will point to in the Senate about, hey, this is 74 to whatever it was will vote against, but you having to explain what that was is interesting at times, but really it was a procedural vote to set that amendment aside, not a policy vote agreeing with banning stuff as a whole. There's a lot of, I know it's shocking, a lot of politics involved about 2 blocks from where I am in the Capitol building on what goes and what doesn't. In this case, there was a lot of concern. There's a lot of back and forth between certain senators in the same party from the same state and certain House members on whether they wanted this language included, and they figured the easiest thing to do, because the easiest thing to do in Washington is nothing, was to leave that in place and let the vote go ahead, reopen the federal government, and we can deal with it later. Now, the nice thing is to point out, not nice, but what the benefit is to point out was the language that actually put this ban in place doesn't actually go into effect for 12 months from when it was signed. So we're down about 11 months now. So that's kind of the background of where we are, kind of a Cliff Notes version. There's a lot more detail that we could go into. It would probably bore people to death dealing with procedural stuff. But I'm going to turn over to my friend Diana here, who knows much more about this stuff than I do, to talk a little bit more about what we're talking about here with these hemp products versus the cannabis products, and kind of where we're at going forward with legislation. I know we're actually made some decent progress in the last few weeks on getting this up to speed. So, Diana, appreciate you on it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, John, and thank you guys, for having me on here today. Diana Eberlein, chair of the Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives. I represent a unified voice for the alcohol and traditional retail space and the low-dose THC beverage channel. So we work together with a number of convenience as well as other traditional retail groups to advocate for sensible regulation and for low-dose THC beverages to be sold on the shelves of your stores. So to John's point, we're here now. The law that will go into effect come November 12th, 2026, which is 365 days after President Trump signed the Ag Appropriations bill to reopen the government, puts us at 0.4 milligrams of THC per container, not per serving, that's per container. It does have that 1-year implementation timeline, which again is how we get to the November 12th date. There are no carve-outs, so this impacts all categories of products. And I think that's really important for everyone to understand. But it was also important to understand that anything now after that date, if nothing changes after November 12th, anything over 0.4 milligrams of THC per container would be treated as marijuana, and therefore, as of now, would be a Schedule I drug. Now, if rescheduling happens, which could happen, Schedule III does change the landscape, but it does not change the fact that those products would not be easily sold at C-stores or traditional retailers. That would be something where you might need a prescription to purchase that product out of a pharmacy, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I think there's a lot of questions at the foundational level of, what's the difference between hemp and marijuana? You hear a lot about one plant solutions. You hear, particularly in Florida, you've got a medicinal channel. You've had votes in the past for, passing adult rec regulation as well. And then you have the hemp space, and all of which have kind of emerged and have made progress and then taken steps back in the past. You guys had a very infamous veto a couple of years back as well to not allow for, hemp. To close and shut down hemp in Florida, which was good from where we sat. But we always want to see regulation, because right now in a lot of markets, we are completely exposed without having testing regulations or dosage caps or pathways to market that are defined that keep these products out of the hands of kids. But to get back to the root question of, what's the difference between these products? To John's point, it was rope, not dope, that was originally passed through the Farm Bill in 2018. And when people realized that they could isolate the D9 in hemp and create an intoxicating product, they found what the government and Congress found as a loophole to make these products accessible through traditional retail channels. But the THC that is being extracted from hemp and sold at these retail channels is the exact same molecule as what you would find in the dispensaries that is coming from the marijuana plant. So the only difference right now between what you are seeing outside of dispensary channels and what's in it is based on how the government has defined hemp versus marijuana. Hemp is defined as anything up to 0.3% THC. Anything above that is defined as marijuana and a Schedule 1 drug, which puts it in a very different distribution and retail channel, which also has a number of penalties like 280E, which puts those products at a 80% tax bracket. They do not get any discount, I should say write-offs like traditional businesses get. It's a penalty for selling a Schedule 1 drug. So that is why a lot of groups did opt to work within the hemp channel, because it provided a number of things. Interstate commerce, moving products state to state, selling through traditional retail channels, which for my industry with low-dose THC beverages, our target demographic is generally the 30 to 45-year-old female who is an adult beverage consumer, not necessarily a cannabis consumer. So as a result, our products saw exponential growth just by being accessible through traditional retail channels. In the dispensary channel, to give you an idea, low-dose THC beverages, which let's say are up to 10 milligrams per serving, or you see like 5 or 10 milligrams in a 12-ounce can, those products represented less than 1% of the dispensary channel sales. This was not a high-performing product in that channel because of who the dispensaries typically target, which is more of a high-dose experienced cannabis consumer. So we've ended up here today with a 11-month runway to create better regulation. And what I can tell you is after this vote went through, which to John's point again, was to reopen the government, not necessarily to shut down hemp. There's been a lot of outcry from various states and congressmen that want to see regulation, particularly from markets that have started to regulate this channel. And Florida is one of those. Granted, it's through FDACS, so the Department of Ag and Consumer Services in Florida, not necessarily ABC like we're seeing in Tennessee or Kentucky, groups like that. That is something that we are starting to see states move towards. But Florida is looking, as every year for the last 3 years, I think, has put forward a hemp bill to look to regulate and create a low-dose channel through hemp. Now, at the federal level, some opportunity and what you'll hear a lot of requests for is an extension to that 1-year timeline. Because John knows probably better than anyone, introducing a bill and getting it through within a year, 2 years, 3 years, it could be very difficult. So in 11 months, extremely difficult. So what we are asking for is to basically say, we want regulation and we are dedicated to working with Congress on regulation, whether that is through the Wyden or Griffith bills that are currently being circulated. But in order to do that, we need an extension because the farmers are going to need to continue to grow. They have to plant their harvests in the spring. And without that extension, it basically eliminates the entire, not just the intoxicating hemp market, but the supplement market as well for CBD and therapeutic products. So this is something that has a much larger impact than I think they originally thought when they implemented that 0.4 milligram of THC per container cap, if you will. So right now we are working on that extension. We've gotten a number of champions on the Hill to say that they will support that extension. And we are currently working with a number of congressmen that are looking to introduce bills or continue moving bills forward to regulate and create a low-dose channel. But again, the first ask we have is really for that extension, which right now we're hearing that there's some interest by some groups to support an extension of 18 months on top of that original 12 months, which got us to that November 12th date.
I just had the dynamic of just things taking a long time to happen on Capitol Hill anyway is once the calendar year has a even number on it, it gets even more complicated. Correct. As you get into the campaign season, because we really have maybe the first quarter, a little beyond that, I think, do real legislating in the even years, usually until the midterm election craziness just takes over. And most of what you're seeing is messaging. So we're hoping to see at least, I think getting something done in that timeline is really compressed. So we can get something as an extension, as Diana said, for the political reality and for the, frankly, on the ground reality of growers would be extremely helpful. We've got a couple different members out there who have worked on legislation in kind of the CBD space, and we're looking at this now to add it in. You mentioned Mr. Griffith from Virginia, who's a good one. Wyden from Oregon. It shows some nice bipartisan support because those who aren't political nerds like myself, Mr. Griffith is a Republican from Virginia in the House, and Mr. Wyden is a Democrat senator from Oregon, who probably agree on nothing except for this, maybe. So I think that's a good range where we're at. Because the interesting thing about this issue, we were talking about hemp or cannabis, either one thing they have in common is it's not so much partisan anymore. There is some partisan breakdown. You usually find Democrats a little more helpful than Republicans on this, but it's almost more generational and what their background experiences have been more so than strictly partisan. So I find that interesting working in this space.
Absolutely. And the conversations you have with Democrats versus Republicans in terms of what their priorities are. Republicans traditionally like to push for state rights, which is something that we've been advocating for, similar to alcohol, how alcohol is regulated, allow the states to regulate this category and determine their channels to market, their regulations, state taxes, things like that. That's something Republicans really generally support. Democrats have definitely been more receptive to this industry in general, cannabis as a whole. So to John's point, where you have groups that sometimes agree on absolutely nothing, this is a category that has oftentimes bipartisan support, but for different reasons. So it's a very interesting industry to be currently representing. And if you look at some of the polls that we've seen, even polls coming out of, Texas or the alcohol policy, the Center for Alcohol Policy, it's showing that 74% of adult consumers who consume adult beverages want to see these products similarly regulated to alcohol because they trust that system, they understand it, and it puts products that they have interest in consuming in, accessible retail locations where they're familiar with shopping and that are part of their routine. So that is something that, we continue to share. And that data is particularly impactful when you're, looking at battleground states during an election year, because if you can show that the 30 to 45-year-old soccer mom is in support of this, it gives air cover for potential champions to come out in support of a category that could also earn them some votes going into the election.
Do you have an opinion that you'd like to share just about the whole in general?
About the, it broke up for me a little bit about the what in general?
Just the retail market in general, how you guys are looking at this new change that's coming your way.
So I will tell you, we have seen spikes in retail. There's never been more awareness about this industry existing than the outrage that kind of came after this vote. We've had more mainstream media coverage, more consumers kind of stocking up on product. I can tell you a lot of our retailers saw major spikes and growth. Now, if we don't see some of the regulatory shifts or any nods toward changing or potentially getting an extension, which our goal would be to attach an extension to the January 30th CR. However, I think the most likely time we will see language introduced that could provide room for an extension might be FY27, which that language typically doesn't come out until May, and which that is a critical time because typically farmers have already decided what they're growing. They've already planted their harvest. And that might be a little bit late, but if we can get a nod that shows that there is interest in regulation and getting that extension, we believe it's full speed ahead. Our wholesalers are still fully engaged with the exception of a handful that had not entered the market yet already. But in terms of states that we're seeing in South Carolina, Florida, a number of others, we're seeing growth. We're seeing them continue to expand. We are seeing some retailers not take on new brands and not maybe expand into new markets, but we are still seeing states continue to push regulation forward. And I think that's a really good indicator that some of these states want to see this regulated because they understand that if this ban language were to go into place November 12th, the bad actors do bad things. So the bad actor products that we are really concerned about, those high dose products that are using synthetic cannabinoids and are often marketed towards kids, they just go deeper into the black market. they don't disappear. The beverages will completely disappear if this language were to go into place. So I think that is something that the states are very aware of, particularly states like Texas that got a veto because they knew that the cartel and the illicit market would be extremely strong if they just tried to ban a $6 billion industry in Texas overnight. So I think that, we are seeing states continue to move forward with regulation, and that is trickles up to the federal level for them to understand that regulation really is critical to creating a safe atmosphere for consumers. So we're still seeing growth, we're still seeing movement, but I believe to John's point, we have 3, 4 to 6 months max to make a heavy impact at the federal level before we start to see, wholesalers and retailers maybe take a different approach or reduce the inventory they're taking on.
Well, that's for you,
Yeah, I think
Stoney. So I was going to say, how is the actual retailer? How are you looking at this, Stoney?
Yeah, my background, obviously, I've been a board member. I guess next year we'll celebrate our 53 years in Florida where we operate with FPMA. I have our company, Hudson Foods, has operated supermarkets, convenience stores, fuel jobbers, fast food, liquor stores. So we've got both realms on the liquor and the C stores, and we had supermarkets. Obviously, I think that a retailer is going to sell it right up until the day he has to stop. And one thing that we've touched on a little bit, Diana, I think is every day we're selling, these single 12 and 16 ounce cans, and we're creating a usage, a pilgrimage that they enjoy and want to continue. And I think a few of them, maybe 5 or 10%, saw the law the other day and are saying, well, maybe I'll start buying it in the 4-pack to try to stockpile some. But, as a retailer, we want to make a good margin on it. The age is only 18 now, but I think, the two things that I see coming out of this bill, which you see in some of the states driving statistics, is don't drive when you're buying this product or after you've drank it, or you must be 21. And a number of years ago, we started out with tobacco and alcohol, and you got to be 35. Hardly anybody looks under 35 or 40. You just have to do that with this product too, because we don't want anybody. I think they're going to come out at 21. But make a long story short, in the retail business, it is growing. I mean, we put a few cans in, and we went with both products. We went with both major distributors, and it's growing. And where it was just an intro, now it's many cases a week per store. I mentioned to a friend, I think yesterday, Total Wine is a big player in Florida, and they went with just a small little end cap, and now they're 16 linear feet up and down. Because they do so well. Circle K is a huge retailer in Florida, and they do 39 different products, 14 different suppliers, because they see that they want to kind of get out in front of this and get some of the market share that we've seen in some of these other states like Kentucky and Tennessee and different ones. Because, yes, it is a threat. I mean, there's that idea that alcohol, might be going down, that, trending down or whatever. One of our big sellers this year, we're up quite a bit in the seltzer beer. The White Claw has done some different things, and it's been out a few years, but it's up quite a bit. But I don't know exactly if I'm ready to say the alcohol is over, but I think more people are drinking the THC products, and they are getting attached to them, and it may be their form of using cannabis. Maybe they don't have to go buy it or roll it or smoke it or whatever. They just drink it. And maybe now they're becoming more accustomed. If they buy a 50 milligram, which one of our major distributors' number one item is 50 milligrams of THC, then obviously, they know how long it takes them to drink that for their system. And each one of us is different. Everybody on this phone call would affect us differently. But when you drink a 50 milligram 12-ounce can, you might need to sip it and drink it over many, many hours so that you're not just laid out on the carpet. But I think that's how a lot of people are taking their product now, and it's becoming a regular usage. And once you've created something, it's hard to stop. And like I say, I was in government for 20 years. I served as county commissioner. I served as city commissioner, mayor. I've served as police commissioner. I've served as planning board and code enforcement. I know how government works. My name's been on a ballot. I've been elected. And I've also lost elections too, because I'm probably too far right. But make a long story short, I think that government can change. And that's what we're trying to do, this 18-month extension, adding to the bill. When there's this many players that are using this product, and they're going to be using a lot over the next 11 months or whatever the actual date is, 10 and a half months, that, we need to realize that's going to create a lot of voters that like this. And these guys want to get reelected. They're gonna listen to the people, but they'll put enough constraints on it that I think will help a lot. But as a retailer, we're making our 35 or 40% right now and smiling all the way down to the bank. And we're not having a lot of issues with product just sitting there either. We've got the nowadays, we've got the Delta, and it's doing well. Yes, very well.
Yeah, one thing that we've definitely seen is a growth of awareness of the category over the last few years, particularly talking to some of the C-store partners that I work with. In the beginning, they didn't have the initial growth that they saw, and it's because they weren't calling attention to the fact that these products were available in their stores. So now they're positioning them a certain way to make sure that there is knowledge to the consumer, because as we know, someone walking into a C-store is a very different shopping experience at a C-store than they do a liquor or a grocery store. So there's limited time to make that impact and make them aware that these products are available there. And because that we have a current patchwork across the United States, not everyone expects to see these products in C-stores state to state. So it's, we've definitely started seeing through data at Nielsen, the growth of this category, particularly through C-stores. And, as we know, C-stores are a leader in RTDs. There's a reason that you guys are good at selling RTDs, and it's because of the convenience and the positioning of your retail locations. And this is something where I think THC beverages can make up for some of the dips that we have seen in alcohol. And that's why we're seeing such momentum there. To Stoney's point on the dosage, we are seeing states implement dosage caps. Not all states have yet, but we are seeing serving sizes being defined at 5 milligrams per serving, 10 milligrams, and sometimes being capped at that. Right now, my personal opinion is until we can get the education out there to all consumers about what the difference between a 5 and a 50 milligram beverage is and what that might be. As Tony said, it's different for everybody. It's really important that we take the time to introduce the mainstream consumer to this category, because not everyone who tries a THC beverage is going to be an experienced cannabis consumer and someone with a higher tolerance. So as a result, that's why the 2.5s, the 5 milligram beverages, particularly depending on who your demographic is walking into your store, those could be really important for onboarding a new consumer that could be regularly purchasing these products. So I think we're still in the early days of really understanding the consumer purchase behavior and where the preferences will be. Right now, the higher dose products are moving, and that's because the experienced cannabis consumer still goes to C-stores, still goes to liquor stores, still goes to grocery stores. So when those products are out there, they're going to pick them up there if they can, instead of going maybe to a dispensary or another retail location. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, here, and as the data becomes more accurate and more prevalent, we'll be able to, indicate where the trends are and where C-stores in particular can really capitalize.
One of the most important questions here, as you guys have talked about alcohol and the THC, how is this going to be regulated, tested, verified, content, consumer products? Have we heard anything about that out there?
Yeah, I think a number of states are starting to get it right. ABC is a, great pathway forward in terms of regulating these products very similarly to other adult beverages. And the reason that we've kind of leaned towards that infrastructure is because it's tried and true. The 3-tier system, I think a lot of people would agree, it is not necessarily a perfect system, but it is a system that exists and has been effective at keeping counterfeit product out of the alcohol industry. And as a result, if you look at what they want to clean up within the hemp industry, a lot of the products they want to get rid of would be considered either counterfeit or illicit product once there's regulation in place. And we already work with wholesalers because wholesalers move adult beverages. And these are just other adult beverages that they are filling their shelves with. So, and same with the retail locations as well. So implementing and interjecting ourselves into that existing system is ideal for us from a distribution and retail standpoint. In terms of testing, there are a lot of testing standards that have actually been created in the dispensary channel that we can actually carry over into the hemp space, if you will, or the adult beverage space that are extremely rigorous. You can track where the plant came from, what state. This, we call it seed to shelf tracking. There's a lot of data that's available that can create and instill, I think, comfort and confidence around where these products originate, how they're manufactured, how they're distributed, and that they're safe. The testing standards have been developed over the last 8 years since, I should say, actually, the first THC beverage is about 15 years old now. And that originated in Colorado. They are now a brand that's available in C-stores called Keef. They are one of the original beverages out there, and the testing standards have existed that long. So as a result, those testing standards and the history of testing stability of these products and consistent experience goes all the way back to those beverages. So, we have a lot more data than I think people realize on the efficacy, but also how we can test to make sure these products are safe. I think those guardrails need to be defined and then implemented, whether that's through the FDA or the TTB in the long run at the federal level is, I guess, TBD. But ultimately, those guardrails get put in place and we're able to clean up this market very efficiently.
I just want to find, I think those federal guardrails are incredibly important for a couple of reasons. One, interstate commerce, being allowed to move these products around. Two, just giving the okay for these products to be out there. I know one of the biggest things we've had with CBD since the 2018 Farm Bill authorized it is they've never had FDA approval. We've been asking the FDA to put some kind of regulatory guardrails around them for years, but technically they're, especially their ingestible products aren't supposed to be on the market. I mean, they're everywhere, but that's an issue we would like to see avoided, whether we're talking about these hemp beverages or if we can get into a cannabis space too. There really needs to be some kind of federal guardrails out there to set out and then let the states go from there. But I think that it's very important those federal guidelines are in place.
Absolutely. We need a federal baseline to start from. And I think state autonomy and giving states rights is going to be a critical component to that, particularly because there are a number of states that already implemented regulations that have departments that are overseeing this effectively. They have taxation in some key markets. They don't want to see the federal government supersede what they currently have. Minnesota, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, a number of them have infrastructures that are very robust. And this is something that they don't want to see go away. And so I think it's very critical that we are utilizing those examples to continue asking for that federal baseline and then pushing for state autonomy on top of that.
One thing I like to add is the thing that you mentioned about the 3-tier system in Florida. It got hit a few years ago. One of the federal guys, legislators, and a component of it, but ultimately, what you can do is make sure the manufacturers are all authorized, and then make sure that the distribution only accepts authorized products, and then obviously they only sell to authorized retailers. But you get a lot of this stuff like we had cigarettes a few years ago that is gray market. You get counterfeit Bic lighters. And there's all this stuff out there that can jump. But if you're dealing with an authorized distributor and limited distribution from a 3-tier system, then you weed out a lot of those problems, especially with manufacturers. And you put enough fines on there and safeguards, you're not going to get the counterfeit product or the crazy stuff that's going to really be psycho or whatever. And that's one of the issues that a lot of people are talking about. When they mix the psychedelic stuff and the kratom and different things, and it's kind of an education that they need to know what we're talking about with just THC, and if it's back to the limits. I think we talked a little bit about it today, but whether it's 5% or 10%, whether the federal government comes in at whatever their max level is, we just need to make sure that that's what it is, and we're not just blowing things up. A good point on the 3-tier system, Diana.
Yeah. And we're in full support of, brands getting registered within states, getting licenses. Obviously, a number of the brands are already doing that in certain key markets and also having to get insurance. So they're already doing a lot of the components that you would typically see if they were operating within the three-tier system. And they're also preparing that documentation so that they would have it to, secure licenses or anything like that, because that's always where we thought, particularly with low dose THC beverages, that we would live alongside the other adult beverages. So playing in their sandbox and playing by the same rules is something that we want to see, and we can always improve upon regulations moving forward. But if we got to create something from scratch, it's going to take a really long time, and it's not going to work as smoothly. And I don't see necessarily why we would do that when adult beverages have already have a history of success utilizing this system. And again, we need to clean up the marketplace. So the three-tier system has done that effectively for the alcohol space, and other foreign countries. We kind of forget this being in the United States. Foreign countries have a lot of problems with counterfeit alcohol, and we don't see that. And part of that is because of the licenses and the registration and the checks and balances within the three-tier system.
So what sectors of hemp industry are most at risk during this ban? Edibles, vape products, like what? Can you give us a little bit of information there, Diane?
It's all of them, candidly. Everything pretty much gets wiped out. I will tell you, beverage in particular, I think takes the biggest hit. And the reason I say that is because these other form factors sell very well within the dispensary channel. So if rescheduling happens and they get those tax breaks and certain things, there's opportunity for some of the other form factors to go to the dispensary channel and perform well still, and maybe drive some of their consumers that they've, their fans, over to those channels. It's still restrictive. It's still difficult. It's still not ideal for a lot of them, but it's an opportunity. We already know that low dose THC beverages don't perform well in the dispensary channel. And I think without very robust education campaigns saying, don't worry, these products still exist. They are in the dispensary channel though. People just assume when a product they buy that was originally on a Circle K shelf or a Total Wine shelf, when that's gone, they assume it's discontinued. They can assume it's gone. They don't assume it got moved to a different retail channel. And I think that is something that's very difficult, for the beverage industry in particular. I think the other component to that is, like I said, some of these bad actors out there, they're just going to go into the illicit market. Beverage isn't going to do that. Our product, first of all, there's no one with a bottling line in the illicit market, so you're not going to see anything like that happening. But where our product thrives is alongside other adult beverages that are already functioning within a regulated system. We are working already on the manufacturing side with licensed adult beverage manufacturers. That's who we're working with. So once, this ban, if it were to go into place, those groups are done working with any of these products. And they're certainly done working with beverage. So I think beverage takes the biggest hit because we don't really have the opportunity. I mean, we can go into the dispensary channel and some brands can still perform pretty well there, but it's going to be a very difficult transition for low dose THC beverage in particular.
And as if from our perspective, one of the things we've been trying to get worked out for a long time is to not have it taken out of our stores and sold somewhere else. Our guys want to be able to sell legal products responsibly on that level playing field. And if it's all of a sudden you can't buy it at one of our stores, but you can in a dispensary, or we've seen it with some of the tobacco stuff like vape shops and stuff, we have a big problem with that. So we'd rather see the fact that our industry has probably one of the best records of age verification, things like that out there. And you see a lot of numbers out there that, think other people do well and some do, but we do really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the age verification system, like True Age, that you guys have created and implemented is something that needs a lot of awareness from a regulatory standpoint, because I don't think that, you always hear the term gas station weed. We are trying to eliminate that because you guys sell more age-gated products than any other channel, and there's no reason that you can't sell, another adult product at your location responsibly. And I think, the fact that we're in DC. The fact that the airports here are using your technology to verify my ID so I don't have to open my bag and do all the things going through security. I mean, I don't know where, You don't get better security than that. You don't get better age verification while also protecting the identity of the consumer and their personal information. I think that is something that we need to do more education on at the state and federal level so that people know that that technology exists and can be implemented to make regulators and legislators feel more confident about these products being sold in mainstream retail.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Absolutely.
If I could just add to that, a number of years ago, there were significant fines in the tobacco and cigarette business when the manufacturer had programs that you did not do correct age verification. And so they had tons, like 27 fields you had to go through to pass your software system to show that you're doing the age verification. So we went and bought a Gilbarco product called Passport cash registers, and basically every tobacco or alcohol purchase or THC, you have to scan a license. You could be 99 years old and you have to scan your driver's license. It does not complete the transaction. You can be terminated if you try to sideline it. But that's the message we need to get out there to the public, that if you have to have a driver's license to buy this product, and you have to let it scan it. I mean, there's no work for the cashier. It's simply a slide through scan that they verify the age. And so that is a foolproof way of doing this so that nobody gets through. And I would suggest that in just about everywhere, because age verification is, if not the most important part in this farm bill, this Cannabis Safety Regulation Act of Wyden and whoever the other guy was there. That all stems back to Senator Ron Wyden is the age factor. Age is more important than anything. We've got to make sure that people trust us when we do the age verification.
Yep,
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was going to be my next thing is, could the ban unintentionally push consumers toward the illicit or the unregulated markets? And I think education, as you were saying, Stoney, and everybody that's probably a big part of that.
Yeah.
I think that's a given. You do it wrong, you're kicking people to the illicit market. I mean,
Yep.
frankly, you do it all. We've seen this in tobacco products, particular with flavors and vapes and things, where people want these products, they're going to find a way to get them. Somebody's going to supply them for them.
Exactly.
It's just what kind of market is it in?
You can't regulate away demand. The reason that cannabis and marijuana started being legalized at the state level was because they had a problem with the illicit market. People were getting these products, whether it was from the cartel or the guy down the street. And consumers have proven that they will purchase these products untested, unregulated from the guy down the street, regardless.
Yep.
So you need to make them accessible. You need to make sure that you don't overtax or overregulate them. I mean, California is a prime example of a marketplace. They banned hemp. And their marijuana channel is being suffocated by overregulation and overtaxation. So the illicit market in California is over 70%. So it just goes to show the demand for these products is there. And if you try to ban these products, you are just going to push people to purchasing untested, unregulated product and putting consumers at risk. Again, that's why we got that Texas veto. That was the main reason, was they were very concerned about taking a huge industry in Texas, which Senator Perry and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick estimated to be $6 billion in Texas. You can't ban a $6 billion industry overnight and expect those products just to not be available and no one to be trying to find ways to buy them. They will find ways to find those products, and they're not going to get them from somewhere that you feel comfortable with. And it's going to get harder to enforce any regulation or finding and identifying those people selling those products. They just go deeper underground and become harder and harder to enforce regulation to keep the consumer safe.
Okay, so do you foresee future amendments to the hemp definition as science and consumer demand evolve? What are we thinking there?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got a number of bills that are being circulated already. I think ultimately in the long term, the hemp versus marijuana conversation will go away and pathways to market will be determined based on dosage. So dosage of THC and impairing cannabinoids. So we feel that low dose THC beverages should be made more accessible through traditional retail channels, and the higher dose products should remain in a place like a dispensary where a more experienced consumer is going to have access to those. There are certain form factors that I think make a lot of sense to be in certain retail locations, not all. I have a hard time, as much as I think everyone should have access to whatever, adults should have the ability to make adult decisions and purchase the products they want. I do have a hard time envisioning a day where there's flour in grocery stores or, in liquor stores, just because it's such a nuanced and very specific category. That said, I think that the regulatory landscapes need to be more even for that to be successful in the future. Right now, I think that what we need to do is leverage the opportunity hemp gave us to prove that we can be regulated responsibly and we can provide safe product to the adult consumer for adults, again, to make adult decisions about what they want. We are going to have to focus on the hemp avenue right now, because I think Congress is too far away from the one plant solution, particularly when you're given a timeline that has November 12th as kind of D-Day, if you will.
I also like in this space where Congress or administration is trying to regulate was essentially really a nation innovative product. Things are going to change so quickly; they're going to need something else down the road. I mean, this is how we ended up where we are now. Is they thought they had it written right in 2018. Well, pretty quickly after that, they did not. So I think there will be some additional stuff. But like I said, we need to get this right out of the gate, get the framework set correctly now to kind of set that up for success in the future. Otherwise, you're going to play whack-a-mole.
Yeah. And the language will be much more detailed in general, whether it's Wyden's bill or Griffith's bill. It's going to be much more detailed in terms of what's permitted and what's not. I think the best way to regulate and make sure you don't end up with, synthetic cannabinoids, because we know science will find a way. Jurassic Park told us that. We know that science will find a way. If we just say, hey, we're banning, certain cannabinoids, they'll be like, well, we created a new one. So we need to be very careful about how we draft this language, because Congress feels, and a number of congressmen feel, that they got duped with the Farm Bill. And the last thing our industry wants to do is put legislation forward where they feel like they got duped again, because we are trying to build trust and show that we are trying to be good partners and that we do want to operate in a regulated space. So I would estimate that the regulation that you see coming out of Griffith and Wyden and whatever continues to move forward is going to be extremely detailed. And I think there will be a lot of groups that really know the cannabis plant very well that are involved in drafting that language, because the cannabis plant is complicated. It is not, this is how we ended up here, right? They rope not dope. That all made sense to me. I remember the first time someone came to my office and said, we can make THC from CBD. I was like, get out of my office. This does not sound real. Fast forward, we were looking at how to naturally derive D9 from hemp. And that was because it allowed us to prove demand for our category and our space, which previously had been told, like, stop trying to make that happen. And now we're in a very different position. And I think we are going to be able to influence change, but the details, the devil's in the details, and we need to get the details right this time, because consumer safety is the number one risk here. And we need to make sure that we are continuing to go in the right direction and that we don't do something that takes cannabis as a whole back.
Okay, guys. How about then? It kind of sounds like you're talking about this particular statement too. What was the primary rationale behind excluding cannabis, Delta 8, Delta 10, THC flower from the hemp definition? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. D8 and D10 are traditionally have gotten a lot of negative PR around and included in synthetic products. And so oftentimes, while D8 does naturally exist within the plant, oftentimes it exists in such small amounts that the products that have been manufactured with them are usually synthetic, and as a result have gotten a lot of negative PR. And if you look at some of the hearing testimonies in various states, a lot of times synthetic products are the ones that are causing adverse effects. So some of these cannabinoids have gotten some really negative PR around that. And as a result, one of the first things you hear when you talk to a congressman is, how do we get rid of that D8? How do we get rid of those synthetics? And so that was a primary focus for them, was to get rid of that. On the THCA flower side, that directly, there's a lot of thoughts and opinions on THCA flower and whether it's actually coming from hemp or if it's marijuana being disguised as hemp for the sake of legality. Ultimately, THCA flower is something that the marijuana industry was going to be heavily opposed to. So I think that there was a lot of opposition and interest in shutting down the THCA flower market. And also there was a lot of PR around THCA being imported in from states like China, or I'm sorry, countries like China, and other places where the regulatory landscape is very different in terms of testing and potency. So there were concerns around that as well. But ultimately it comes down to a lot of the adverse effects were often, and concerns around high dose product were tied to those three particular categories.
Anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you have to do when you actually get down to convincing these Congress folks is getting their personal preferences out of the decision making and listen to their constituents. You know, we had a particular congressman down in South West Florida that thought that he knew everything about a particular alcohol issue, and he didn't listen to his constituents. He didn't look at the facts or anything else. But when you've got a number of consumptive uses, and Florida is a high tourism state, I don't know, 150, 200 million a year come here. So we get everybody else's states to come down and visit, not to mention the people that are moving down here thanks to New York vote and everything else. But obviously, you know, we have a really big cross section of user bases, and as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have more and more people using this product, and it's going to take, you know, education of these elected officials to understand that the usage is there. And we touched on a few minutes ago, it's only growing every day. It may be your form that you use this product, and you're not necessarily getting hooked on it, but maybe you are. And now you need it and you want it. And I think we've got to do a good job legislatively communicating that and making sure that they look at the facts on these issues and not just what, you know, Joe Schmo said down the street, and they get mixed up on the, you know, the cannabinoids and the Delta 8s and the synthetics and stuff like that. Because it's easy for these guys to get mixed up. We've got to do a good job of translating the usage and what should be safe. And in that respect, I think we can make some inroads. A lot of these guys are just waiting on some of these bills to come up.
Absolutely. I think polling data is going to be particularly huge. We've seen it impact a number of states, Texas, being one of them. Obviously, there's been a lot of polling at the federal level to prove bipartisan support. But I think, you know, in certain key markets, showing them who the target demographic is, what they're consuming, how they're consuming it, and how they want these products to stay in market. And the fact that there's interest in them being regulated very similarly to other adult products that congressmen and regulators are very familiar with. I mean, part of the reason why beverage is so palatable is because they're familiar with adult beverages. I've joked that I don't think there's a city in the world that needs THC more than DC right now. Everyone just needs to calm down. But you know, I think ultimately it's part of what makes this category for THC beverage very appealing, but also the fact that our target demographic is 30 to 45-year-old soccer moms. That provides a lot of air cover for congressmen to say, hey, this isn't just about creating intoxicating products for, you know, 21 plus. This is soccer moms using it, you know, on their Tuesday night. You know, there's that supporting the suburban mom is something that a lot of congressmen want to do. They want to listen to their constituents. And I think that polling data is going to be critical going into particularly an election year.
Two more questions if we can. So you're talking about, you know, just like Stoney was saying, you know, letting people know what you want. Are you guys going to be sending, you know, maybe some form letters or whatever that we could possibly use to help get that information out? Because people don't know how to ask, you know,
Sure.
and send things. So if we could get some type of form letter from you guys, we can get that out to Stoney and the members and stuff to help with that, if that would be good.
Absolutely. And something that we're going to look to launch in Q1 here, again, to keep the momentum kind of going in the awareness, is a retailer campaign, in-store retailer campaign for consumers who, want to be heard. I think a lot of people still maybe don't know that this could go away within the next year. So we want to put some signage next to some of the displays. Obviously, I know there's limited space within C-stores, but I think, with some signage and just a QR code where they can scan that and go to a platform that's going to have a pre-drafted letter. They put in their zip code and they submit that letter. I think that can be really beneficial. And again, keep the awareness up to consumers that this is something, if they want it, we need them to speak up and be more vocal about it. I also think that will help with some earned media as well. Just, keeping the awareness up. We have a few other ideas that I'm working on, executing that I think can be really helpful in certain key markets, Florida being one of them. Between the weather in Florida and the fact that they have more access to THC beverages, I might be down there, Stoney. In the next, I'm over the cold here in DC. But I think that in certain key markets where this has really grown rapidly, and not just for THC beverage, just in general, access to THC infused products, I think keeping that awareness up and using some in-store retail displays and just awareness and signage, as well as providing those letters so that we can make sure that the businesses can make sure that their state associations are also involved. Because in some markets, I actually had, and not C-store groups, but I did have a certain state reach out to me and go, wait, does this supersede our current regs? And that was after the vote had happened. So we need to make sure that that awareness is up and that the retailers are making sure that their association is being active in speaking to their congressman about this issue, because there's a lot of issues. There's credit card swipe fees, there's tariffs, there's all sorts of stuff. And we just need to make sure we don't get lost in the sauce, because there's a lot of sauce out there right now.
Well, if I could just continue. Yeah, John, she hit the nail on the head with that QR code and that pre-drafted letter. Yep. I think that is something that we could get in every FPMA account in Florida. And when they hit their zip code, it goes right to their congressman, and the letter goes right to them 2 seconds later. You guys have done a fantastic job with that. But that is an outstanding idea, and that gets it out in front. And these guys actually weigh their letters. I was with a congressman last night, and they weigh how many letters they get a day. They get 1,000 emails, but they say how many are for and how many are against. Yep. And I think we could do a fantastic job with the QR and the pre-drafted letter. That's an excellent idea.
Yep.
No, the grassroots push is the best way to get things done. I mean, like Diane and I can go talk to these guys who are blue in the face, but they need to hear from their folks back home, and that it doesn't matter what issue we're talking about. But I think in this one in particular, the grassroots push is going to be huge. So like once we really have an ask, whether it's like we need an extension of 18 months or a year, whatever it is, once we have that ask narrowed down, we're going to be going out and saying, hey, we need everyone to send letters in and make phone calls and tell their members this is what they want.
Absolutely. And we're going to be much more, we take very targeted meetings on the Hill. We've never done kind of just a general fly-in, because we want to make sure that we can really, contain and control the narrative about particularly what we're asking for. But I do think what's critical when you do have these meetings with members is to bring in one of their constituents, have someone come in from Florida and have those meetings with Schultz, to have someone come in from, Virginia's right here, but, bring in a wholesaler and a retailer to talk to Griffith about what's moving and what they would like to see in terms of progress within this bill. It heavily influences their decisions when they meet with a constituent. And then on top of that, you add the letters from consumers, retailers, other business partners. And one thing that I've, talked a lot about is, we hear a lot about the hemp industry and the jobs that are reliant on the hemp industry, but they talk about the hemp industry specifically as being 350,000 jobs. But that's not including the marketing agencies that have built their teams up because they've been doing so much on the hemp side. It doesn't include the wholesalers that have been able to expand their teams. Even though alcohol sales are down, they're still able to fill their trucks and they still have the demand. That doesn't include the warehousing that we are starting to require and farmers, across the US. So this will have a ripple effect way beyond the hemp industry, if you will, if this goes away. And then you start thinking about the supplement space. That's a whole other demographic and a whole other use case and a whole other retail channel that can be impacted. And C-stores obviously support that as well. But the ripple effect is much wider than just the hemp industry. And I think that's a really critical piece that sometimes the congressmen need to hear and need to visualize. So bringing in a wholesaler, bringing in a retailer, bringing in a warehouse guy that's storing these products, that can be extremely helpful, particularly when you're talking to Republicans who really care about jobs and are kind of watching that as one of their key talking points going into next year.
We have hit the 1 o'clock mark already because this is a hot topic. This hour just flew by, guys.
We could talk all day.
I know, this is awesome. So first off, I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, to tell the folks out there if they want to reach you. Let's start with John. How do our folks, if they have any questions, reach out to you?
Okay. Email is probably the best, and you see my name on the screen there. It's first initial, last name, so JTAETS at convenience.org. You can also give me a call, number 703-518-4224.
And Diana?
I just threw mine in the chat to everyone as well, but Diana Eberlein, Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives is the group. My email is diana@adultbevalt.org. I know it's a mouthful, didn't think about that when we did that. But that's the best way to reach me. And I will not be offended right now in particular that we've had so much outreach in terms of education support, which is something I really focus on, is educating groups at the state level, but also helping people feel more empowered to talk to their congressman about this issue. So any educational sessions, virtual, we do a lot of activity in Florida. So if I happen to be down there, I'm happy to do an in-person and collaborate on meetings as well. But don't hesitate to reach out to me. Email's the best way to get a hold of me.
Great. And Stoney, would they like to get a hold of you? Just your email?
Yeah, email would be great, Shane. It's just smith@hudsonfood.com. And like I say, I've been with FPMA. I guess next year will be our 53rd year. But
you don't look that old there, Stoney. You must have started when you were 2.
Yeah, but great organization. We want to thank you and Ned and everybody for putting this on. And let's get out in front of this issue. 10.5 months will be here before you know it. But like I say, these congressmen, they need to hear your ear. And like for me as a business owner, I only get so many issues to talk with them about. Yes, credit card swipe fees is very important. I think we know where that issue is, and those bad guys are. But obviously, the this issue with the hemp and the possible extensions, or that's another key issue, and we've got to get out in front of them and let them know how we feel. And I think once we do that one-on-one, we can sway the deck a little bit.
The other thing I'll throw out there just to end on this, it's critical you get involved now, particularly in a state like Florida that continuously has regulation put forward. It's going to be a lot harder to get added in later as a channel to have retail, and liquor is walking into the room saying, hey, you got to be 21 to buy anything at our store. And they're utilizing that against other retailers so that they can own the channel. So the more vocal you are, the more likely to be included in the regulatory pathway. And that's why the education on the age gating is so critical as well.
All right, guys. Well, again, we thank you for your time. And when I get information about from Diane or John, I will send it out to everybody here and put it out on the website. But again, Shane Schaefer, Shane@fpma.org. If you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out. So, guys, I thank you for your time, for taking this. I think it's a very important issue, and we'll stay on top of it. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks a lot.